The last couple of years may make a lot of people feel like the acceleration of the world totally falling apart is here. And yet, as much as freedoms have been at stake, as much as taxes have been going up, as much as things have been changing, and often not in good ways, particularly in Western countries, what many leaders are actually concerned about is something called social cohesion erosion. Basically, people are at each other's throats. And I'm going to share with you this story right now. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. And I found an article on Fast Company called Why Global Leaders Are Terrified About Social Cohesion Erosion. What is that, you ask? Well, they're going to answer. But to me, this stands for the idea that the social fabric is falling apart. The reason that so many of you are coming to us here at Nomad Capitalist and saying, I don't recognize my country anymore. I don't feel free in my country anymore. I never thought my country would do this or do that. I just don't think it's acceptable where I live to be a capitalist or to be successful or to be too wealthy. That all comes down in a nutshell to this social cohesion erosion. Now, the comments we're going to hear are from these world leaders who, of course, don't want you to be too wealthy, don't want you to be too successful. But let's go through this, because I think this is important, and I think it speaks to something that a lot of nomad capitalists are thinking about right now. Here's the article from Connie Lin. The global pandemic has blazed a long trail of upheaval, the vast majority of it bad: surging inflation rates, small business devastation, and a death toll. But according to a new report from the World Economic Forum, that's not the worst of it. What we should fear most is social cohesion erosion. I want to know what you think about this. Leave a comment below. That's the fastest growing threat to our planet since the COVID crisis struck, she says. Now, in case you worried about what the World Economic Forum said, pay attention. And if you didn't care, then pay attention also, because I think this is valuable. What exactly is social cohesion erosion, you ask? If you think it sounds scary, you're not alone. And if you think that you need to protect yourself with a plan B, a second passport, a tax plan, a plan to escape, a plan to grow, if you think you need plan Bs for like every aspect of your life because of social cohesion erosion and the fact that the World Economic Forum is talking about it, then you're right. Yes, you do need all these things. You do need asset protection. You do need residences and passports, because this is going to become something. According to the WEF, it's perceived, this is a quote, perceived as a critical threat to the world across all time spans, short, medium, and long term, and is seen as the most potentially damaging for the next 10 years. Now, if you're wondering why your application, your CV, to work at Nomad Capitalist from the World Economic Forum didn't get accepted, we didn't interview you, it's because of this. I have no idea what that means, quite frankly. What are they saying? Who knows? But they're up to something. Social cohesion worsens upon rising diversions and polarization in society. Here we go. As income inequalities are exacerbated by the pandemic's lopsided recovery, for example, with 51 million people projected to live in extreme poverty by 2030, while billionaires grow richer than ever. Of course you knew that was going to be the first thing they would say. Of course that would violate social cohesion. Forget the fact that people who we work with have become wealthy during the pandemic. They spent their time when they were locked inside building businesses or learning how to day trade or learning how Bitcoin worked and buying their first Bitcoin when it was $5,000. No, that doesn't matter. What matters is that even though capitalism has cut the number of people living in extreme poverty, that they mentioned from 50% mere decades ago to under 10% now, they want to continue to use numbers. No, of course, no one wants anyone to live in extreme poverty, and quite frankly, the thing that we teach is go where you're treated best, dramatically lower your taxes, and rather than having some big bloated government waste that money, give it to help alleviate those problems. The same way Elon Musk said, if you can show him how to alleviate global hunger, he'll make the transaction today. He wants to help, and I think a lot of you want to help. A lot of nomad capitalists want to help. We know that the government's not doing it. We know that when I go to countries around the world and stay in 5-star hotels and I've got to walk half a kilometer from the street into my hotel because the police have it cordoned off to protect some kind of agriculture summit where a bunch of irrelevant government ministers get together to discuss never improving anything, that's not where our tax dollars should go. That's not really having an impact. Of course, we believe our tax dollars have an impact ourselves. And this idea that social cohesion erosion is worsened by the fact that due to stupid government policies, inflation has been exacerbated. People who own assets have seen the value of those assets go up, on top of the fact that there have just been more opportunities. Interest rates are incredibly low. People are buying businesses, they're buying homes, they're buying things on a margin. And people who have taken risks have become successful during this pandemic, including those of us who didn't have a lot to do for a couple of months back in early 2020 and decided to put that into improving ourselves and improving our business and improving our wealth. Now you're the villain. Now the fact that you were already successful, these people always assume, by the way, you inherited it or you stole it because that's the world they come from. They never assume that you sat around and rather than watching Squid Game or Tiger King on Netflix when you were stuck inside, decided to, create a business. And again, we've helped many people who've become millionaires throughout the course of the pandemic. They are somehow the reason for social cohesion erosion, according to groups like the World Economic Forum. But the article continues, erosion also lurks in the fissures created by opposing viewpoints on things like vaccines and face mask mandates, and in the rallying cries for long-awaited racial justice in historically oppressed communities. Listen, I'm not going to comment on those two issues because certainly you can say there's some merit to some of that. Some of it, all of it, I don't know. But the idea that the world has moved to, listen, if you don't agree with what we say on people that we deem oppressed, then you're just terrible, and you're not allowed to have a different opinion. I'm not talking about broadcasting it even. I'm just saying the fact that you're creating social cohesion erosion by the mere fact of saying, well, hey, wait a second, I'm not so sure I agree with what the World Economic Forum said on that. You're now part of the problem. Put simply, it's the crumbling of civil society, which has been happening for a long time in the West, I added that part, fractured by divergent forces from within. And then they, of course, get into all the stuff about, listen, I don't want to make this political. They get into stuff with Donald Trump. They can't help it. We're not the biggest supporters of Donald Trump here, but enough. They just can't keep going back to the same wells, and that's kind of the point. It's the crumbling of civil society, and yet somehow, in my opinion, civil society in many Western economies has been crumbling for some time. This is why people in the last couple of years have been calling, and I see this firsthand all the time, and saying, I don't recognize the country. I never thought it would get this bad. I never thought I would want a plan B. I thought I was an American. I was born in the United States, or I was born in Germany. I was born as... I thought that was the golden ticket. I thought I would never need anything else. And obviously you have plenty of Australians and Americans and everything else who don't like the idea of go where you're treated best. They don't like the idea of having competitive options. They just want to stay there and wave the flag and say we're the best. But more people than ever have said, wait a second, this so-called golden ticket that I thought I had isn't the golden ticket. And obviously what I'm talking about, the idea of moving to Malaysia or buying property in Colombia or investing in Cambodia or living in Serbia, that may seem extreme to people. Their first step may be, hey, maybe I'll go to Mexico for a while if I'm from the US, or is the UK accepting anybody? But the idea is that there are so many places that are open. And by the way, when you go to a place like a Serbia, when you go to many of those countries that I talked about, many of the emerging places that are smaller countries, that are more nimble, that are actively trying to be more competitive with things like lower tax rates, more personal freedoms, whatever, these countries, I don't believe, have the same social cohesion erosion because they are smaller, because they just don't have the big bloat that countries like the United States have. And yet the article says it's not just domestic either. Social fraying endangers global populations as a sense of disenfranchisement grows in large swaths of the world, especially amid a lack of collaboration among powerful governments, which have largely failed to help developing regions crawl to the pandemic, resolve humanitarian crises, or fight natural disasters wrought by climate change. And that's true. You certainly have large countries that want to go and tell smaller countries, no, you shouldn't sell citizenship, or no, you shouldn't lower your taxes. But when it comes to actually doing anything for them, they're silent. That's why countries like Pakistan have stood up and said, we don't want a global minimum tax. It's just big, rich, wealthy Western countries trying to attack us. Now, you may not care about that, but what you certainly should care about is the fact that this social fraying, as they're saying, is happening where you live if you're watching this. People are increasingly at each other's throats. They're calling for all sorts of change, and maybe some of it's good, but maybe some of it's bad. And what I know about a lot of the change is if you are successful, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business, if you're many other different categories, you are going to be viewed as part of the problem in many of these countries, merely because you are successful. When you look at, for example, our industry, we are part of the citizenship by investment industry. That's one of the things that we do. There are people led by woke organizations like the Guardian newspaper who simply don't like the idea that because you have money, you can get some kind of access. They figure you must have gotten your money through nefarious means. There's no other way to be successful. And then the fact that you can take those ill-gotten gains and buy access to have an option, to have a competitive option that you don't have to be tethered to only one place, that's the worst thing in the world in their opinion. They want you to stay and have to deal with the social cohesion because it's your obligation to have to see the erosion, to have to see that because you did something allegedly to somebody else, or you took from someone else because the economy is a zero-sum game, or because 200 years ago something happened, now you have to pay the price, and you have to sit there and watch as society erodes in front of your very eyes. A gloomy flowchart in the World Economic Forum's report lists the possible offspring of this social cohesion erosion, including youth disillusionment. It's already, of course, happening. How many youth in Western countries believe it's the great country that other generations do? They see the cracks. The same way the people that we're working with see the cracks, the youth are seeing the cracks. Social security collapse, livelihood crises, pair that with mental health deterioration. Well, maybe we should blame the government for that. Another side effect of the pandemic, and it gets even scarier, all that could become a slow burn with fallout covering the next decade. And then they go on to talk about their risk mitigation events, which I don't think we're interested in. But understand that if you are the 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur, you will be deemed to be the problem, and you're going to be made to suffer. Not only in the form of higher taxes, I see more talk about wealth taxes all over the world, and they want to take your money. I saw one wealth tax that they were proposing recently, 5% a year. Where is any conservative investor making 5% a year right now? I mean, you've got to really swing for the fences if you've got a 5% return in this very low interest rate environment. I mean, that's really taking a bite out. And that's the goal. You are the enemy. They want to take your wealth. They don't want to it's not just about raising $100 billion or whatever the amounts are. They always talk about, oh, here's how much money we're going to raise, as if taking more of people's money is justified because look at all this pot of money we'll have to waste now and to have conferences at the Ritz-Carlton and talk about how we're going to solve problems that we've never solved in the last 50 years. But what it really is about is taking your wealth because they don't want you to be more wealthy. They want you to be less wealthy. They're offended that you've become wealthy. And if you want to give money to your children, how dare you? Certainly, you can argue that giving children and grandchildren wealth isn't good for them, and I would happen to agree with that. But whose business is it of the governments or the World Economic Forum to do that? And it's certainly not their business to say that you're accumulating wealth because you've worked hard or taken risks means that you're damaging the fabric of society. It's their inflation. It is their inability to grow wages. It is their inability to be competitive. You know what? Wages where I'm from in the United States are stagnant. Now, I'm certainly a very small force in this. Perhaps you are too. But you know what? None of my 50-some colleagues work in the United States. And that's because there's no incentive. In fact, there's a disincentive for me to hire in the United States. There's many disincentives because countries like the United States have decided not to become competitive. And then they create social cohesion erosion, as they call it, when those people say, well, why aren't our wages going up and why is inflation 7%? At least that's the official number. How are we supposed to compete with this? Because people like Andrew send jobs to other countries where the conditions are much better and people are more eager to work and the governments are much more welcoming and they'll roll the red carpet for you in some cases. Why would I decide to go to a place where they actively punish me rather than where I can go to roll the red carpet? Only if I believed what the World Economic Forum believes, that I should be punished for choosing to be successful and for everything that I've done, just starting with zero. I should be punished. I should choose to be punished because I feel like I'm contributing to the erosion of society. And that's, of course, simply not how I feel. You're not contributing to the erosion of society. They have pitted people against each other to where now some of these Western countries, the United States, people want what they call national divorce. Some people are saying there's going to be a civil war. And while that may be extreme, when did you hear about that 10 years ago? I don't believe it's because of some people getting wealthier. You can deal with that problem separately, but the government has been taking away people's freedoms for decades. They've been taking away more wealth. They've been doing a terrible job, and they've merely been resting on the laurels that we call the legacy brand. They figured, hey, this can never go away. This gravy train's here to stay. And in 2022, more people, what I think have learned through the pandemic is you can go anywhere you want, including to countries where there is more social cohesion, where people aren't at each other's throats. If you're trying to get away from that kind of culture, there are plenty of places to go. I believe geography can solve all in this case. And quite frankly, you don't have to be blamed for this. You don't have to deal with it. This is why having options of residences and citizenships is a good idea. And in the era where this is being discussed, it's not just about money anymore. It's about how are you going to protect yourself? How are you going to live well? How are you going to protect your family? And I think that all the Plan B strategies we talk about help you do that. I used to live in the US. I saw this coming. I don't see it in my life now nearly to the extent I did in the US when I live in other smaller, more nimble, more welcoming countries. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalists personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.